I attended the trial. Fine. A trial only, there's no way that a trial can show everything, reveal everything about the people that's involved in the case. I wanted to know something about the personalities of the people that were involved and the backstory. Why? I guess mainly I wanted to know why. Why the murders, why somebody had to go into a maniacal type rage, to do what was done to the victims. And it's almost like they were insane for a few minutes. It's like they totally lost it. Jeffrey McDonald was another story. He looked like one of the attorneys coming into the courtroom, well dressed every day, carrying a briefcase, attaché case, haircut, dressed to perfection, the California tan. And then all of a sudden you realize, hey, he's not an attorney. He is the person that's being prosecuted for these murders. I had a lot of mixed emotions at that time. And there again, I have to say, I wanted to get into the background as much as I could. I was not done by any means. So Peter Kearns is the one who opened many doors for me. And I remember the day that Peter and I, Jeffrey McDonald and Bernie Siegel, was in the same elevator together. And it stopped at a floor, and this beautiful black girl got on, the African-American girl got on, and he ogled her something terribly, making the comment, "I like brown sugar." And then when we got off of the elevator, there was Peter's daughter. And man, he started in on her, and Peter didn't like that at all. So he gave him a dirty look, and that was the end of that. Those are just minor things that I remember. First time I saw Peter was at the trial. I would say hello to him and try to talk to him, but he was stuck solid. Whenever he was at the trial, he was stuck solid with Freddie and Mildred. And after the trial was over, I did some research and I traced him and I found his email number. I'm an armchair detective, I call myself, and I found out what his email was. And I sent him an email and he responded to me. And we became great friends after that. I went to visit Peter and Gladys several times. Well, he gave a lot of classes, for criminal justice, and Grebner was teaching in Fayetteville someplace, and he got Peter a job. And then he did the tape, the CID tape, and there was somebody else. There was somebody else that was supposed to do it, and he turned out to be a gay guy, and he was very sissified. So he didn't do it. So anyhow, Peter ended up doing that narration of the CID tape. Peter Kearns was the lead investigator on the reinvestigation of the McDonald murders. He came to Fayetteville in December of 1970 and into 71. They reinvestigated it for 2.5 years. He had a crew of Pickering, Bill Ivory, Robert Shaw, and he dealt a lot with Chris Chamberlain, and that's all I can think of at the moment. There was quite a few of them. With Peter, it opened many doors for me. There were people that he wanted me to meet that could help me along, and he made it possible for me to meet those people. Then I met Bob and Pep, and we clicked right away. We became very, very close, and they adopted me into the family. I have power of attorney now for the Stevenson family, that anything that Bob's not able to attend or whatever, that I go, and speak for the family or represent the family. Oh, yes. Takes years and years and years. And Peter was another good friend. Bill Ivory's a wonderful friend. Jim Blackburn, several people that I know that I won't mention names, but that were high up in the government that helped me a great deal. And when I would call and ask questions, they were never angry or anything. They took the time to explain things, and even though I would come with a lot of questions, they never tired of answering the questions. Paul Stombach was a man like that. I went to visit him in South Carolina. In his basement, he had a replica of the McDonald apartment, and he never tired of talking about that case. And he provided me with a lot of his letters and letters that he had sent out and documents. He took a copy of all of his files when he left the FBI And he shared them with me, all of his drawings and things like that. Well, I'm not so sure of that. There are other people that have things. Well, that thought was always in the back of my mind, but I'm from the South and it was show me beyond a reasonable doubt. And when I started taking some of the things that he said, one of the things that he said bothered me greatly when he told his psychiatrist. He says, I have a sense of relief that they're gone. And I thought, how could a man say that about his wife, pregnant wife, and children? I mean, I can understand someone saying that if they were sick and they were suffering and they passed, and you would say, okay, I have a sense of relief that they don't have to suffer anymore. But Colette wasn't sick. She was pregnant. She was anticipating the birth of her son, their son together. And to say, I have a sense of relief they're gone, to me, that's just not what you say. He was never very complimentary to Colette. It was always she was a messy housekeeper. Her drawers were messy, whatever. That may be true. But Colette's top priority was her children, and everything else could go by the wayside. She spent time with those kids, and they were both very, very smart. Greg Mitchell was in the group that I could have turned the clock off. Every 15 minutes, when it gets done, if you just go and stop the pendulum. No, yeah, just grab a hold of it and stop it, and it'll stop the time. Greg Mitchell was in the group of people that Helena ran around with, and during most of that time he was her boyfriend, and that's about as much as I know about him, because Helena said that he was one of the people that was there that night, and she said that they were parked in front of McDonald's apartment, which would have been an impossibility because his car was parked there, and I have pictures showing his car parked there when the MPs came. Well, so people say. I never heard him confess. He passed a polygraph that he was given. There was none of his DNA, no evidence that he had ever been in the apartment other than Helena Stokely's say-so. Yes, alcoholism and drugs, and they drifted apart. And finally, Greg met a nice girl, Pat, and they got married. And everybody thought his life would change then. I've talked to his family. Greg's family. In fact, they reached out to me. They did not. I talked to the daughter of Dennis. He's now passed away. There's nobody left in the Mitchell family. But their family was contacted by the defense side and wanting permission to exhume Greg's body. Now, at the time that they were contacted by this individual, the sister was dying with cancer, and Dennis had just been diagnosed with cancer, and they wanted to be left alone. They were doing everything they could to get them to sign this release, even to the point of sending them honey-baked ham, and not letting it go until they were finally told, we're not answering any more of your calls. Please just leave us alone. Well, there were two rehabs. There were two rehab centers. One was called the Manor, and one was called the Farmhouse. Now, it is reported that someone resembling Greg went there, gave his name as Dave. His stature was primarily the same. He had sandy color, red hair, bright piercing blue eyes. There was Randy Phillips, who was there at that time. Randy Phillips said that he confessed to some people, but he never heard him confess. He never confessed to him. And he left a few days later, and when he left, he ran off with most of Randy Phillips's clothes. And that's as much as I know that happened at the Manor. Then it goes from there to the Farmhouse. And the Farmhouse was another place that they had bought, and they were getting it ready. It was farther out into the country. And on a Saturday afternoon, Randy Phillips took Ann Kanahi, I think is the way you pronounce her name, and another lady named Juanita out there. And when they got there, they saw two people running out of the back door of the Farmhouse. Randy said it looked like the guy named Dave, but he just got a passing glance, didn't know who the other person was. Then they kind of got scared seeing people go out of the house. They went back on 95 at the gas station there, and they called the sheriff's department, who sent a deputy out. And they went in with the deputy, and they found in a bedroom adjoining to the living room that on one wall in 4 lines was written, "I killed McDonald's wife and children," and that it was dripping red paint, had run down from it. Nobody had a camera, so the deputy said he would be back the next day and take a picture of it. When they came back the following Sunday, the whole wall was painted over, and there is no report. I went to the sheriff's department. I did everything I could. I could never find a report about what's written on that wall. Now, according to Phillips, he said he did not see it. He saw the wall after it was painted over. Now, they referred to him as Reverend Randy Phillips. He was not a minister. He started several years later into ministry college, and he did become a minister, but it was many years later. He was not a minister at that time. I don't know. I have to question if they called the sheriff, if the sheriff come out as what's in the report, the affidavits that were given, then I realized back then they didn't have communication directly like what we have now. But why didn't he send somebody back to the gas station and say, have them send somebody with a camera out here? I don't understand why you leave the scene of something like that without securing it. Yeah, who painted it? We don't know who painted it. And there is no report of a sheriff ever being there. So what happened to that report? I have to question the credibility of those 2 women. I'm sorry. I really do. I don't know. I didn't hear it. I know that Bryant talked to me many times. Bryant was many years after the fact. In the beginning, Bryant didn't say that. Later on, when they were doing the, I can't remember, false justice or false witness, I think it was, then they got him again. And that time he said that Greg confessed. But this was, my God, what, 20 years later or what? Your memory is just not the same. I know mine's not. And I know Bryant well enough to know that his certainly is not. No, that is... I have to think for a minute now. I'm not sure, Morris, if that was one of the people that Greg knew or if that was the one that was involved with Jimmy Britt from the apartment building. Okay. Yeah, no, I never talked to him. Maybe they wanted maybe they want attention. Maybe Helena wanted attention. I think she was starved from attention. I think that she grew up in a very rigid household, and I think there came a time when she rebelled. This is only my own personal opinion. I have no way of knowing, but she confessed and recanted. I cannot tell you how many times. Confessed, recanted, confessed. Each time deleting or adding something to the new confession. Even to the point of saying she had sex with McDonald, that she was his, and McDonald never addressed that issue. Never once has he ever addressed that issue. Also said that she was a babysitter. She was never the babysitter for those children. So, how do you place, when you know it's a lie, how do you place any meaning on this whatsoever? Yeah, she keeps it alive, but she's dead now. And yeah, I guess it is. And I don't think it will die. Even when McDonald dies, I don't think it will die.
Tell me why.
Because I think his significant other will carry it forward. Probably I'm going to say that Norma contacted me about 12 years ago. She sent me an email, and I responded straight away. In fact, I called her, and we had a nice conversation on the phone. And then I got to meet Bryant, talk to Bryant on the phone, and we just formed a friendship, and she asked me a lot. She told me that she was contacting me because she found my website, and that she had believed in the beginning, based on things that Greg had said, that maybe he was involved. And they actually contacted the defense and told them. And she had contacted McDonald's website, and she waited 3 months or whatever it was, 6 months or ever how long it was, and nobody ever called her back or contacted her to let her know the status of the case. And she contacted me, and I called her back, and then we just started communicating. And that was how we became friends. Right. It's an impossibility. How could somebody that you loved, like Freddie and Mildred, how could they think that the one that they brought into their family, that they loved like he was their own, do something like this to their daughter and their grandchildren? You know, it's very hard to fathom. Oh, yeah, people change their minds over time because they start picking up on things that he says and what the evidence show, and things that he claims and things that other evidence shows, and things that he said at the trial, the way he acted at the Article 32, the way he acted at the grand jury trial. He was a raving maniac. Sam Lee was a friend of Bryant's. That's how he came into the picture. Yeah. Nothing other than being a friend of Bryant. Yeah. Oh, yes, I did a lot of work. I traveled to many cities that I had never been before, went blind, meeting people that I don't know what would happen, you know, but they always welcomed me with open arms and no criticism whatsoever, and took the time to talk to me. I can't say he was always a happy camper, but he says, my wife has a mind of her own and she's going to do what she wants to do. Well, first came Ted Gunderson. That was Ted Gunderson at first, and then they got rid of Ted Gunderson, never really paying him. They only paid him according to the files that I have with the checks and check numbers and amounts, $2,500, and that's all he ever got. Then they got Ray Shedlick. I believe he was from New York. He was a police detective or something in New York, and he started. And that's where he come up with all these Ann Carnegie and this Juanita and this Randy Phillips and all these people at the coffee shop or donut shop supposedly seeing Helena and
the night of the murders.
Right. Yes, I saw how he told. I have a video of how he talks about every person that he interviewed and what part they played in his investigation. I had to shake my head at some of it, really. I mean, one that really got me, but I don't want to get ahead of you, so, is the Edith Boucher who said she saw these people at the school the night that Colette was there. I wonder how in God's name could she have seen what she said? I'm not saying that she didn't see 5 people, but she said that they were all hippie typed and all dressed. Then she says that she saw Greg talking to Colette, and she recognized that it was Colette from a picture that she later saw in the newspaper after the murders, and that she heard Greg Mitchell saying to Colette, if you go along, I think it'll be all right, and that Colette said, I dread, and that's all that she could hear. Well, at the time that she says that she was witnessing this at the school, Helena was visiting her brother because it was her birthday at the family home. So I ask you, how could she see Colette at Fort Bragg at the school when she was visiting her brother because it was his birthday, February the 16th? And at the rehearing in 2012, when Stokely testified, he said Helena was there visiting him, and it was her birthday, which was February the 6th. You're not going to trip. You're trying to trip me up here. Yes, you are. You got to read me how I know. My God. To Shedlick?
Yeah.
No, I had no desire to talk to that man. No desire whatsoever. Now, I wouldn't have mind talking to his daughter, but the chance never presented itself, and I never pursued it. Gunderson I talked to is a very gruff type guy. Big, he was former FBI agent. He believed that McDonald was innocent. He really did believe that. He sent me a lot of things. He was writing a book. He sent me everything that he had written in that book until McDonald told him, you will not write a book. You do not have my permission to write a book. And he wanted to talk to the Baxter, I think was his name, the polygraph examiner that did the first polygraph. He wanted to get a copy, and find out about that polygraph, and McDonald wouldn't give him permission. Neither would he give Joe McGinnis permission. Yes, I do. I have Baxter's testimony where he testified about that. He testified in that when McDonald sued McGinnis. Got you on another one. Cleve Baxter was his name. He was a few years ago. Now I don't know. I know that there is another that he taught, and I can't remember who he was. And at the time, I did call Cleve Baxter, but he never returned my call. He was the leading one in the polygraph field at that time. He was always involved in conspiracy theories, no matter what it was. I mean, like the thing that happened with the school children and all that, it's a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy. His head was conspiracy. That's all it was. Yeah, he could be a little nuts at times. Oh, yes. Satanic things and all that. No, I didn't buy into that, and I told him that. But for some reason or another, he would talk to me. He sent me things that he had wrote, published. He says it's $15. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not paying. So he says, that's okay, I'll send it to you. And then when he sent me the stuff, here comes the box. And in it was all about the book, all the information he had gathered about writing the book. And I got to tell you, reading it, it made a lot more sense than Fatal Vision or Fatal Justice. Fatal Justice did. I can't be still. I'm never still. Okay, I'll put the other one back. Shedlock? The defense team hired him. His role was the same as Ted Gunderson, find evidence to prove McDonald not guilty and to get him back into court for a new trial, which has never happened. Yes. And that they even picked her picture out, not her picture, but the police sketch. See, he did 2 sets of sketches, McDonald did. First after the murder and then after the hypnosis. So yes, they picked out Helena's picture and said that was her. She was like any other hippie at that time, long stringy hair and boots. And hippies don't kill people. They don't want war. They don't want to fight. They want to make love. Well, I really, to tell you the truth, don't know that much about the doll hair. I know that those kids had hair. I know that it was Saran. I know that Lucia did investigations on that. The doll's hair when it's made, I can't remember the name of the person, doll maker now. Judith, yeah, doll hairs are doubled. Like if it was a 22-inch piece, it would be doubled and only be 11 inches. And she talked to the FBI. And I have her interview on the website. But you see what I'm doing? I want to play. I like to play with things. Okay. What? Yes, very interesting. I'll never forget that day. I'll never forget Freddie Kassab, the longest day I live, because during that trial, I sat directly behind him and Mildred. During that trial, he would make little utterances every once in a while, and Judge Dupree was a man that would lean back in his seat with his glasses on the end of his nose, and you'd think he was asleep until somebody said something that he didn't like or that he didn't feel was correct. He'd spring forward like nobody's business. Here's Freddie there uttering these little utterances under his breath, liar, these kind of things, and Judge Dupree would get up and look, but he could never figure out where it was coming from. He knew which direction it was. And he'd call me, quiet in the courtroom or I'll clear this courtroom. It wouldn't take Freddie too long before he'd start again. But anyway, getting back to the question that you asked me, Helena. Freddie was sitting there, both of them always dressed. Freddie would come in, take off his coat, folded. He had a white short sleeve shirt with a tie, Mildred to perfection. This day, Helena. Everybody was going to get to see Helena. Well, they go to get her out of the hallway and they bring her in. Everybody in that courtroom turned around, including the lawyers, not Jeffrey McDonald. He set forward. Never once was he curious to see. This is the woman I said was involved in my family's murder. Never once did he turn around, which I thought was very strange. We all turned around and looked, because we wanted to see what this mystery woman looked like. I don't know what Freddie thought in his mind, but he had already gone through Helena's confession number by number by number and wrote, things that he picked up on that was not true. I didn't know what she was going to say because she had been so iffy, wishy-washy. On this side, he's not guilty. On this side, I was there. On this side, I'm not there. I mean, you never knew what she was going to do, but she denied being there. And she said, do you know how many drugs I've been on? um, in here, and she would tell them if they ask her something, I don't remember, you know? And I wasn't there. That's all I can tell you. She denied it. Yes, it was a shock. It was a shock, I'm sure. Just every day, Helena confessed to anybody that would listen to her. Everyday people. Could be people on the street. Whoever she happened to be with, she would confess to, and then she'd recant, and then she'd confess again. No, never did. I was told by Prince Beasley, who was a Fayetteville detective that was with Gunderson when they took Helena to California, and they wanted to do a polygraph on her there, that Helena had said that she was there, and she would tell all what happened if they would give her immunity. But she never asked anybody of authority other than Ted Gunderson. And he tried to
ask for immunity.
For immunity. She never asked any of the authorities or anything. Yes, I have it. When I saw it, and it was introduced as evidence at one of the hearings. Very strange. Very strange. I don't know where her head was. I just don't understand. She was missing. She needed something in her life, and she would invent things to be in her life. Yes, yes. I remember one thing that stands out, that when they asked McDonald why, if he knew his neighbors upstairs, and he said yes. Why didn't he said he knew them, but not well. Well, the fact is that past Christmas they had been at his house and had cocktails and hors d'oeuvres for several hours. They asked him why he didn't go. He says, well, I didn't know him that well. To me, if you are in trouble and your family is in trouble, you run and you scream. You don't go through the house methodically, checking bodies and checking pulses. You run out and you start screaming, and you run for the phone. Help me, I need help. And also, something else that bothered me is when he called and he said, I need the MPs, I need ambulances. He didn't say my family's been stabbed. He said some people have been stabbed. That's his words. I quote, some people have been stabbed. So that's what his family meant to him. They were some people. I can't remember what I said now. Whatever. Oh, yes, she did. Sorry, guys. Little man, lay down right beside Mama. Prince Beasley told me that Helena was the best informant he ever had. He said that when she told him, you can do a bust at such and such, or so-and-so's in town with what, he said, I could bank on it. He told me the story of how one night she told him, if you want to make a big bust, you can at this house. Now, you go, if the red light is on, that means no go. If I have the green light on, that means you go. And they busted and got a large quantity of narcotics. So he swore by Helena, as far as being a informant. And he used her up. He was Papa. And she always called him, even after she had the little boy. David was her son's name. And when she was living in Seneca, North Carolina, she would call Beasley, and Beasley would come down. And she would ask Beasley, why don't they leave me alone? Why won't they leave me alone? How he picked her and the baby up and brought him home from the hospital and brought her food, went to the store and got food for her because all she had in the house was peanut butter. No, that's what the family said, that he became Papa Beasley. Yes. Well, it wasn't anything other than being an informant. No, but she always called him. It was like she depended on him. She would write him letters, and whatever. And when the baby was sick one time, or she was sick anyway, they were at the hospital, he went and picked them up and took them home in Seneca. And she didn't have any food. And he went and bought food for her. I think that he may have felt sorry for her. That's the only thing I could figure out, because he seemed to always want to be there. And don't forget, he made a lot of busts because of Helena Stokely. He got recognized as officer detective for the year several times. And Helena Stokely played a big role in him becoming that because of the busts that she arranged and let him know of. For Ted Gunderson. Ted Gunderson wanted Helena to come to California. Prince Beasley went with her to California. He at that time had started to work with Gunderson. They took her out and they wanted to get her to confess, and she wouldn't confess. Anyhow, they set up this polygraph test with this guy. I can't think of his name was Scott, I think. Murrow, whatever his name was. And the first part of the polygraph, it was going well, and then they broke. And later on, when the second part was going to be done, he comes storming into the room where Gunderson and Beasley was and says, "What the hell did you do to her? You know, something is wrong now. I'm not continuing this polygraph." Yes, evidently. She had done drugs. I wouldn't be a bit surprised. I wouldn't be a bit surprised. And I'll tell you what she referred to all the time as being if they gave her immunity, she would tell them she was talking about, allegedly talking about drugs that were being sent back from Vietnam in the body of dead soldiers. That's what she was alluring to all that time. That's what Prince Beasley told me. And that, in fact, was happening. And I won't go into that because that has nothing to do with this case. But that case eventually was solved and figured out, and she had nothing to do with it. By then, he was confused, and he would say one time one thing, the next time it was totally something different. And I'd say, "But you said," and he'd say, "No, I didn't say that." Because he was working with Gunderson at the time. Gunderson was paying him. Well, Gunderson put out a lot of his own money, that he never got reimbursed for. Promises that they would write a book and she would get money, quite a bit of money. Yeah. With David. Now, I have to go off camera here because I saw the 60 Minutes. I have the film, if we're talking about the same thing. Whether it got aired or not, I don't know, but I saw the film. And it was very shoddily done. It was pieced together, and you could tell that it was spliced together. Yeah, because Ted Gunderson talked her into doing it. He was going to write a book and get her in the movies, and then he was going to relocate her and Ernie Davis, and who knows. He made so many promises to her, and none of the promises, they were all empty promises. He could do nothing for her. So McDonald could get out of prison, so that McDonald could get back into court. They found out during the Article 32. Oh, yeah, because Helena wouldn't testify, but she had already named Greg Mitchell, as being one of the guys that was there, and said that Alan Masewicz, and he was in jail, during that time, because I searched that, and he didn't get out of jail until way past that. And then there was another guy, I think he's passed away now. Can't, Shelby Dunn, somebody. Yeah, I have no idea. That you'd have to ask the defense. You would certainly think that they would, because I do not believe that, I believe the polygraph was done much later. I think it was somewhere in the 80s when they started polygraphing all these people, and they all passed the polygraph. Well, the defense didn't want him in court, and it's like the defense says that they're the ones that found Helena Stokely and is responsible for bringing her to the court. That's not true. Judge Dupree executed a witness warrant to pick her up and have her brought there, and then they couldn't make up their mind whether they wanted to call her back the second time. And finally, Judge Dupree told them, "If you're going to call her back to the stand, do it now, or I'm going to release her," because she was still under that warrant. They took, trying to convince her when they had that meeting. He came into this, Jimmy Fryer came into this, I don't remember the exact date, but on February the 16th, I know that he went AWOL. He was being hospitalized at the hospital, and it made me look back. He was being hospitalized at the hospital, and he went AWOL and left the hospital and went into Fayetteville to shoot pool and drink, and he got drunk, and the last bus had already went past. So he started calling the base, and his doctor had been a Dr. Robert McDonald, but it was spelled different. It was spelled MC, and they told him that he wasn't on duty that night when he called. So he waited a few minutes, and he called back and said, "I'm a doctor. I need to speak to doctor." So they supposedly patched him through, according to him, and the female answered the phone, and he heard somebody say, "Hang up the goddamn phone," and then he heard the phone drop. Right.
At the murder scene.
At the murder scene, yes. He came forward and said that, but this guy had mental problems. He'd been in and out of mental institutions. How he was in the service, God only knows. But he had been tried. He had been in several prisons, and even for mail fraud. I mean, it was just unbelievable. I don't think that you could believe what he said. No. Here he talks about this Jimmy Fryer who called and who talked to Helena. He was positive it was Helena since Helena had said she was there. And I don't know, he must have had a big letdown because he was not credible. Jimmy Fryer was not a credible, he would not have made a credible witness. Oh, the one with the glue, with the airplane. Oh my God. This guy said he saw people in sheets, and he was up around midnight, and he was putting model airplanes together, so he's probably high on glue, and that he saw him going down the street. It was an impossibility. A totally impossibility. I mean, he must have felt like a jackass. Reacted towards him. It was like shake your head in total amazement. How could you get on the stand and say you were putting model planes together with glue and you saw this? Do you think maybe you were hallucinating? Yeah.
Candles.
Yeah, with light, and it's raining. So how do you have a lighted candle in the rain? Do you shield it too? Yes, because I was following what was being written in the newspaper. This was during the Article 32, before it happened, after the murders. Yeah, it was big news, back then. And we didn't have 24-hour television back then. So TV went off at 10 or 11 o'clock at night. But I read it in the newspaper and I followed it, and I said when they had the Article 30, and I said, if this thing goes to trial, I'm going after, they said there was insufficient evidence to warrant a court martial. And first off, this case has set many records. It was the longest Article 32 in history. The investigating officer was not a lawyer. It was the last case that they did not have an investigating officer who was a lawyer. So it set that precedence, which is good. He did have a lawyer there with him, an attorney there with him who advised him. But another thing I found very strange, and Beale, I think was his name, Beale, that during the time that he's advising Colonel Rock, he takes his girlfriend to McDonald in his BOQ because she was sick to examine. Now, to me, this should have never happened. You just don't do this. And he evidently had been friends with McDonald. So I thought that was very unfair. Longest case in history. How many times it's been to trial? My God, how many times I've sat in courtrooms. How many times I've been to Virginia, to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. It's just unbelievable. Unbelievable. I'd written down on that paper all the dates. I can't remember them. Anybody who would listen. What? That Helena had been at the crime scene. She did not participate. She held the candle and chanted, "Acid is groovy, kill the pigs." Yes. He was an interesting man. And later, I met his granddaughter. And that was during the time that I was talking to him. And she told me, my grandfather is an honest man, but right now he's got dementia, and you have to take what he says with a grain of salt. Oh, yes, I do believe that he had influence over her. I bet you he could get her to do anything he wanted her to do, or say anything he wanted her to say. I haven't.
So a father figure.
Yes. And that's how the mother, the way that she expressed it in articles that I read and in depositions that she gave, that's what they thought too. I'm assuming, just by my interpretation of how they referred to him as Papa Beasley. Because it certainly wasn't a case of the old man, rich man, with the young woman. That was not the case at all. Yeah, they gave him a choice. Prince Beasley was a detective. He was very good at what he did for many years, but then he started with the dementia and his memory wasn't what it should be, and they gave him the choice to retire or they would have to let him go, so he retired. No. He had alcohol problems. He was a drinker. Yeah. He could guzzle them down. I know I sat with him, and in a short amount of time, I think he had 3 or 4 drinks. He was a drinker. I met him in I don't even remember the name of the restaurant now, because this is back, we're going back to the 80s, in the 81 period in there. And I was in Fayetteville and I met him and went into, actually, it was a bar restaurant. Well, they served food. He was 4 drinks within that short amount of time of 45 minutes. It was no more than an hour. And 4 drinks went down, and it went down like water. And it didn't seem to faze him whatsoever. Yes, I don't divulge my sources. I'm sorry. Yes, yeah. He says Helena confessed. Whether she did or not, there again, I can assume, but she may well have. I don't happen to believe that if she did, that it was the truth. What? Well, I'd sure like to see what I took all that time finding the answers to. You know, it was worth it. Why? I know that I haven't said all that I wrote on that paper. Well, at least it's cool in here. I think it'd come off of my baby. I'll sit on it for now. Yes, it is, and it's not well done. Yes, he was good at what he did. Prince Beasley was very good at what he did. But as he got older and he started to slip, he was not the man. According to the granddaughter, he had been in the Navy. I believe it was the Navy. And he had got injured on one of the ships, and he was never the same. But he came out and became a police officer and then moved up to becoming a detective. I think basically he was a decent human being. I think he got mixed up with Helena, and I think that she had so much connections in the drug community, and that's primarily what he was out there doing to try to rid the community, society there of that she became such a help to him, you know. Yes, yeah. Yeah, he saw her, if I remember, 2 weeks before she was found dead. She was found dead in her apartment. Yes, she had called him, and I think that was another time that he had taken food for her. Is he coming over here? Yes. Okay. Yes. I think it's all concocted, and when you get to the point of where he tells his secretary, don't type anymore, it's like he changed a lot of her wording. Yes, yes, I do. I truly do believe that. In one of the documents that he gave me, and it had to do with her testimony, or not her testimony, her confession that she gave to him, he was saying, don't type anymore until I get this straight. Or something, that's not the exact words, but in essence, he's telling her, hold off typing until he could do what he needed to do, whatever that was. Well, one of the things that Helena said was that they wanted to get even with Dr. Donald for the way that he had treated druggies. It used to be that came from a meeting that was had. It was established at that time that doctors no longer could not withhold, if somebody was a drug addict. And they took it from there and said, don't trust anybody from that point. And that's when they started calling him a snitch and whatever. If I could read my notes, I could answer the question sensibly. I don't know if what I wrote down there, or I would have to go and read, but I know that there was some kind of a meeting, and at that meeting it was, they said that there was no longer that privilege between doctor and patient, that the doctors had to report the soldiers, and that then there was something even about the priest. They were trying to say that even the priest, and that's where that picked up. They wanted to get even with McDonald because he was a fink and he was turning druggies in and that kind of stuff. The hobby horse in 2012, that was very, very interesting. But to go back in the beginning, some reporter snuck up to the house. And the window was open. The blind was, like you would have it open for sunlight, and took a picture. And you could see the hobby horse. Well, Helena said that she tried to ride the hobby horse, but it was broken. But that hobby horse didn't look broken in that picture. And at 2012, when Leslie, she was one of the attorneys, had found a hobby horse just like that one from that era and brought it in with the springs and everything, Bill Ivory had to go down. They let him get down off of the stand and go and unloosen one of the springs to show what it would look like if one of the springs was broken. So that part of the statement that Helena made is not true. It was lopsided. It had 4 springs. You take a hobby horse, it's got 2 springs, one on each side in the front and one on each side. So they asked Bill, and it's very hard to take it loose. And he took it loose, and that hobby horse, it was cockeyed. So the picture was not cockeyed. So you knew right away that that wasn't true. Maybe she rode a broken hobby horse someplace else. No, Helena always said that initiations and whatever was when you had to go out and kill somebody so you could get initiated into the group. I never heard anything about that from anybody else. Those 2 girls that night that were living with her, I believe it was Kathy Smith. Maybe she was the one that was going out with Harris. Yeah, was home painting their apartment. Now, there was some talk about Satan being painted on some wall in somebody's house. I never saw it. I just heard about it. So I don't know anything about that. I know that Helena wanted to go to the funeral and nobody would go with her. She'd even gone behind the florist and taken flowers that they had thrown away and taken them home. So she was mourning them too, according to her. Dressed in black. Oh, yes, said she dressed in black that day, didn't leave her house, had those flowers, wanted to go to the funeral, but she couldn't get anybody to go with her or take her or whatever it was. I was in California. It was on the news that she'd been found dead in her apartment. Then I started digging and I found the article and how nobody had seen her for a few days, and they went into the apartment and found her dead. No, the opportunity never presented itself. You know, I go where opportunity presents itself. Peter Kearns, for one, told me you'll never get any place with her. Right. And I know from other people that had interviewed her said it was the same old stuff. Confess and recant. Confess and recant. Stokely family, okay. You were? Because McDonald had got the right for a new hearing. And we all went, and none of us, well, of course, I got to be in the courtroom. When we would go, we would get escorted in by John Bruce's assistant, who would take us to the grand jury holding room, and we would all sit there. Well, then when they would call to court, Bob and I, of course, would get escorted into the courtroom after everybody else was seated, and that was a big contention there. Yeah, a lot of people didn't like that. And I walked in the first time I saw McDonald. I could not believe what a shell of a man he was. And I thought, compared to what he was when I first saw him in 1979, and now it was like the portrait of Dorian Gray. There's no other way to put it. No. They wanted to have a hearing to see if there was enough evidence, to get a new trial. So all the witnesses had to stay in the grand jury holding room until they were called. And some of the people had some problems. I got to say that the defense attorney was not very kind to some of them, like Bill Ivory and Butch Madden. They were both hard of hearing, and they would have to ask for repeat from time to time. And he didn't want to be bothered with repeating. But the judge finally said, we have to speak up here, and be able to hear what they're saying. Yes. The Jimmy Britt claim is that he confessed, gave affidavit, that he transported Helena Stokely to Raleigh. Well, part of that is true, because he did escort her from the jail to the courtroom. That's the only transportation that he did. Now, what he did when his wife testified, he had told his wife that he was married to at that time that he was going to pick up Helena and bring her back across the state line. But they found all the people that transported her, and they were there testifying, the ones that were still alive. And the matrons, because you have to have a female if it's a male officer transporting another female. So there were matrons as well, that transferred that, that said that's not true. The only place that he I'm adding this now. According to the record, the only place he transferred Helena was from the jail to the courtroom every day, waiting for her to be called. Nothing wrong with my hearing. Thank God. Don't sell yourself short. Maybe you're going to have to get down. Yes. Okay. It was quite a scene. It was very interesting. Matlock, the front of that building is where the Matlock series, when it shows the courthouse in Matlock, that was what they did. Very, if known. Yeah. The hearing in 2012, it's a very old courthouse, very beautiful. And the front of the building is where Matlock, the series, was always filmed at. We got in, we'd go in the side door because we were with the attorneys, and they would check us out, but not as rigidly, is what most of the people that were going in. We still had to produce our ID, and they went with us over the thing, but we didn't have the long wait and the long lines. It was good seeing Nancy and Joe and Butch Madden and so many people that I had never seen, but recognized their names straight away. It was very interesting. And back in that room where they were holding us, we had some good conversations back there. No, not really. When we were at the Fourth Circuit Court, every time we were there, we were inundated with press. Will you speak? Will you speak? Will you speak? No, not that way at the 2000 hearing. They were there, but they were far from being aggressive. There was media people that were sitting inside, and writing down their reports and whatever. As far as outside, yes, yes. That's Joe's wife, Nancy. Yeah. Yeah. Earl Morris was there. I gave him a good piece of my mind when I was there, because I didn't appreciate what he put in his book about me. That he mentioned me by name and said Christina Masewicz has a website and part shrine to Colette and Kimberly, and I told him I'd rather have a shrine to them than believe that their killer is innocent. He called me several times, and I tape recorded the conversations. And I told him I was taping them, and he says, well, I'm taping too. I said, fine. But he lied to me, and I don't like to be lied to. He said to me, I haven't made up my mind as to whether he's guilty or innocent, when in essence he had already made up his mind. Maybe he's changed his mind now. I think the trial was fair in 1979. Whatever the defense, Judge Dupree, he was a hard man. And I heard him say things that made my skin crawl when they were going through the picking of the jurors and everything. And I had already made up my mind to dislike him. But once I saw him in action in the courtroom, I could not dislike him because I felt that he was fair. I felt that he was very, very fair. And as many times McDonnell and the defense team has always said, he didn't give us any leeway whatsoever, and he was for the defense. Let me tell you, as many times as he called Siegel down, he called Murtaugh down, or Blackburn. He let both sides have it when he thought it wasn't right. The hearsay evidence witnesses testified in the absence of the jury. It was, that was the decision that was made. He could have called them back, but he didn't call them back. And whose fault is that? That's Bernie Siegel's fault for not calling them back. Right. Yeah, because it then becomes hearsay. She said, I said. She told me, and I'm telling you. Well, if you ever played the game Gossip, let it go around, and by the time it gets back to you, it don't even sound like the original story. I have a bed that massages me at night. Well, did you talk to any of them? Did you talk to Red? Yes. Yes, but a hostile witness, he could have questioned her as being a hostile witness. That doesn't mean that he couldn't have examined the other people. Bernie went about this whole thing wrong, in my opinion, Siegel did, because he went at it like he went at the Article 32 hearing. Now, we're in North Carolina. We're in 1970. They're not ready for Bernie Siegel with the bushy hair and the outspoken man, and he's trying every night afterward, he's trying his case in the media. I mean, he was a media whore, whatever you call those things. Between him, the prosecution didn't give interviews, They said, we do not try our case in the media. We try it in the courtroom. He was bushy. He was a Jewish man, which shouldn't have any bearing on it. But in the South, Wade Smith was a member of the Bubberhood, so to speak. If Bernie had only let Wade Smith do some of the examination, and especially the closing arguments, You know, there is a very strong chance that he might have persuaded some reasonable doubt. But Bernie just kept going and going and going. And what was he trying to do? He was giving them a lesson on what reasonable doubt was when the judge had already told them.
County jail.
Yeah, right. That was not true. Yes. According to what Britt was saying, is that he delivered Helena Stokely to the room where Blackburn was going to examine her. Now, there's a clicker at the end of the story. But before I get to that, I will tell you, he says that Blackburn told him to stay. The only time you would tell a marshal to stay is if you thought the prisoner was dangerous. She wasn't dangerous. So no, he did not stay. He was not asked to stay. And what Britt didn't understand was it wasn't just Jim Blackburn there. Brian Murtaugh was there. 2 other attorneys were there. But he didn't know that because he wasn't there. So he kind of cooked his own goose. He said that Blackburn threatened her and told her the same thing that she had told him, Britt, when he was driving her to the courthouse, that she had confessed to him. And none of that is true. There was 1, 2, 3, 4 people in that room. Yes. No, Murtaugh didn't, and Crawley did. He was there. Yeah, he has a lot of problems now. And he testified. That was, no, Crawley, Murtaugh, Jimmy Blackburn, and there was one more. I can't think of who it was right at the moment. Yes, I saw a very angry woman. Angry over the fact that how her husband had treated her and how she had to fight him to get everything for the children, so that they could barely live. I saw a lot of anger. She swears up and down that he told her, "You have to go tomorrow morning to Pickens to pick up a prisoner to bring her back here," and that he named her by name. I don't know. I don't know if she was just so angry over how she had been treated, or maybe he did actually tell her he was going. Maybe he wanted to impress her, but in fact he did not. That is a proven fact. Yes, it is. I do. I think Joe McGinnis did an excellent job, and I think his book, Fatal Vision, will go down in history as one of the top crime books in the history, of triple murders. It must have been very hard for Joe because he went into this thinking that because he really liked McDonald, and McDonald made so many mistakes, and then he let him stay at his condo, and he told him, "You can look at anything I have in there." That's when Joe started finding all the things, the papers and the documents that he said. I had to shake my head and I had to say, I have to wonder, this is not right. This is not true. Why is he lying to me? Oh, yes. I do believe that you would. People do multiple. Why do people, when the police come to their house and say, "I would like to look in your house. I don't have a search warrant," or "I would like to look in your car if you're stopped," and the people say, "Go ahead"? Why do you think? They're hoping that maybe they'd just skim over and not see what's there and say, "Oh, they were cooperative. They let me." There's 2 sides. I've wondered that myself. I truly believe he had a vendetta against Judge Dupree. There was a thing that happened, and also his retirement party. When he wanted the retirement, then he didn't want it. Then he called up and said he wanted it and tried to dictate how he wanted it. And the ladies of the jury one day brought in cake for Judge Dupree. And Jimmy Britt didn't get a piece. However, it worked out. And he was so angry over that, which is a stupid thing to be angry over. I can understand him wanting a piece of the cake. But hey, you didn't get a piece, so get over it, Yeah. The prosecutor, Jim Blackburn. And when you look at it, Jim Blackburn was the prosecutor. Helena Stokely was the person that he was going to interview. As an officer of the court, you have to take into consideration, he must give her the Miranda rights. He must say, "Are you talking to me willingly?" Or, that, and then he must say, "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." That's his job. He's an officer of the court. She's a witness, but he still has to give her the Miranda rights, that anything she tells him. Oh, yeah. And he thought, but everything backfired on Jimmy Britt when they had sent a notice to the Hall of Records that they could get rid of all the documents, instead of waiting for 50 years. Well, for whatever reason, they got rid of everything except that file and some others and actually found the people. That's how they found the people that actually transported from the records that was ordered to be destroyed. And Britt waited until that matron, and I can't think of her name now. She's since passed away. That was with him when he took her from the courthouse to the jail and the jail to the courthouse. He waited until after she passed away. He traced her down, found out that she was in a nursing home someplace, and then they called, and she had passed away. And he thought he was safe because his wife, his then wife, still worked for the state. And she probably told him, we got the notice to destroy all the documents, and it's been long enough, that they've been destroyed by now. But little by some miracle, and nobody knows why. Yeah, he was a womanizer. He was not well liked by his fellow workers. He had fights with them because he thought they were hitting on his women and whatever. He actually came to blows. He was warned many, many times. I mean, get his record and read it. You might be surprised. Well, perhaps he had alcoholic dementia, induced dementia. Who knows? But I know that he was not a very nice man. And based on what his wife said, her testimony at the 2000, her life was a living hell. Well, he was the court-appointed attorney for Jerry Leonard was the court-appointed attorney for Helena Stokely. Now, this is a very strange situation, and the first time that I've ever heard this, that he went to get her, and he was supposed to find lodgings for her. Instead, he took her to his house, and she spent the night at his house. Now, I don't think that was appropriate, but, well, he testified to that at the trial. He testified. I have the records if you want to see them. Mm-hmm. Well, he's a very unstable human being. Let me put it to you that way. Yeah. Yes. Well, all I know is what he said. That's what he testified to. Yes, I remember the DNA. For years and years, McDonald had been on television. Any talk show or any place he could get people to listen to him and say that the hair in my wife's hand came from her killer, and it's going to set me free. Well, it came back, and it belonged to guess who? Jeffrey McDonald. Yes, it was, if I remember correctly. That was discussed. The E5 hair. One in her right hand was her own hair, and the one in the left hand still had the root attached. They did the mitochondrial DNA, and it was his. Well, it should have taken the air out of a lot more, but unfortunately, it didn't. There's been enough bites out of the apple. There's no more apple left. Yes, Joe McGinnis was very precise. He had already told me, well, no, I'm getting a little ahead of me. Joe has always been a very truthful man, and we discussed the case, and when I was going to write things for my website and whatever, many times I'd run it by Joe, and he'd say, no, that's not exactly me, and he'd say, why not say this? This is what I thought. Because he was correcting me, I had interpreted it not the way that he would like me to interpret it. So we had done that for quite a while, and he'd send me emails, and I'd send him emails. And when he did his last book that he did, that was, yes, he called me and wanted to use some pictures that I had. And of course, I allowed him to use the pictures. I had no reason not to. Bob told me you can do whatever you have, can use them, but nobody else can. So, yeah, I knew. He sent me a copy of the book, and he says, now I want to make some money, so don't be sharing it. But that was Joe. But then I felt so bad when he got the cancer, and he sent me the email, and he just said, you know what? I don't care anymore. I've said what I had to say. I wrote what I thought was the truth. He was at peace with it, and he says, I'm dying, and I know I'm dying, and no, I'm done. Yes, yes. I remember it, there was dead silence in the courtroom, and McDonald kept looking back, kept looking back. He was trying to find Catherine. It was his wife. He kept looking back during that whole testimony. And yes, he read, and he answered all the questions precisely, that was asked of him. And I thought he did a wonderful job. Then he could be in the courtroom once he got off of the stand. He could be in the courtroom. Nancy had been in the courtroom the whole time because she was taking notes for him. Oh, yes. But he held his ground very well. Joe doesn't back down from anything. He just told him that's the way it is. Whatever you say, you're entitled. My opinion was it was like you're entitled to your opinion, I'm entitled to mine. Not unless I went and took a gander at it really fast. I couldn't quite figure him out because in one way he was talking about his sister Helena coming to visit him on February the 16th, which was his birthday, which was the night of the murders, and that she had driven herself to his house. And then there were other things that he told about when Helena came to visit her mother and father. This was before the father died, and he was there. She had come with the baby son, which name was David, so that her mom and dad could see it. And he was asked during that, did Helena look sick or anything? And he said, no, she, didn't seem overly sick or anything. And that she was there with her mother and father and visiting with him, and he didn't spend much time there, he said. But a deathbed confession has to be if you're in the dying process or on your deathbed. That was months before, and she was able to travel. So I don't consider that a deathbed confession. Yes. After years and years and years, and I still don't understand that affidavit she did, it makes no sense. Because here's the affidavit on her one page, the signature on a totally different page. It makes no sense. There was plenty of room on that page, the second page of that affidavit, that they could have put everything that they needed, the seal, whatever, there. But they didn't do it. I don't know. What do I really think? I'll tell you. Some hanky-panky going on. That the affidavit was done at an earlier time, and it was signed at a later time, is what I believe. But everything, it's very strange that Helena's family said during those early years she couldn't kill a fly. She loved children. And then all of a sudden, no. I think maybe Helena Sr. had gotten a little senile because she had gotten very sick and had several falls before they ended up putting her in a nursing home. She was on oxygen. So already, my first thing was, did a doctor check her before? What was her O2 saturation? Did she have enough oxygen, that was working the brain properly? And what was her diagnosis? What was her diagnosis admitting her into a nursing home? Did it say she had dementia? Those are things that would go through my mind being a nurse. Well, that may well be, but my memory is not that great back to 1979. I know a lot, and if you refresh my memory on things, I say, yes, I remember that. But ask me to come up with things, it's very difficult unless I make myself notes. I can't depend upon my memory for over 40 years. Well, it was 49 years if I remember correctly, this past February. We just can't remember everything verbatim. I thought he was a little nervous on the stand. My first thought was maybe he had restless leg syndrome because he kept moving so much, but that's beside the point. I think he thought that he was doing what he should do, and that's what he did. I have no idea why. I know that he did say he had talked it over with, I think he said it was his brother, and that the brother and the rest of them had advised him not to do it. They weren't not advised him not to do it. They weren't in favor of it. Yes, he was. He was very angry at Helena because he said he got bullied. He got picked on in school, your sister's a murderer, that kind of thing. Excuse me, I don't think he had a happy childhood. I think it left a lasting impression. Yes, was dictated because of this, and then the father, being very stern, would not allow it to be talked about. So, of course, nobody could ever talk and try to come to terms with what anybody believed. And whether that would have been a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. But to just say that subject will not be discussed, I don't think was a very wise thing. Being that he was so young at the time, I think he needed to understand what was going on. So at least he could have put up some kind of a defense when he was being bullied. Yes, yeah, he did. But he also testified that she had always been very close to him on his birthday and that she didn't miss his birthdays. She always come around to see him and always had something for him. Yeah. Yeah, he did have a point. He had a very good point that What Helena Stokely tried so hard to make people believe literally destroyed his family and gave him not a good childhood. He did not have a good childhood growing up because it led to the bullying and, being called names and your sister's a murderer and, that's not a happy childhood, and that should never have happened. Well, if she was telling the truth, she should have told the truth, told the whole story, and stuck with it, and said, this is the truth, and that's it. If it was a lie, then she should have stayed away, and stayed away from it. Why confess and recant? Confess and recant, and say things that McDonald chose not to answer. Now, why did he choose not to answer when she claims that she was there 2 weeks prior? Yes, yeah, it doesn't jive. And the problem with the whole thing, as I see it, is this. McDonald told a story before he knew what the evidence was. Then the Article 32 hearing was premature. I think they had it too soon because many of the lab reports were not even back yet. He got himself in a pickle because then he had to try to change his story to meet what the new evidence, when they started coming out was. And he didn't do a very good job at it. Look at all the story about he was in ICU for several days, when in fact he was in ICU for 24 hours. We've put in chest tubes right at the bedside. I'm telling you, so that they kept him in ICU for 24 hours is not something that they needed to do. However, this is an Army hospital. They want to do their very best, for their men that's out there. But, no. Yeah. And how did his blood, he says he only went to the door. How did his blood get on the floor in front of the kitchen cabinet where he said he was attacked? And he said the guy raised the club up over his head. Now take the height that he said the guy was. I believe he said 5'9", 5'11", something like that. You got a 31-inch club. How high is that when you raise over your head and you're that high? You raise that club up over your head, you're going to scrape the ceiling. There was no scrape marks in the living room. There was scrape marks in the bedroom where he brought that club over and hit either Kimberly and or Colette. He said Kimberly was sleeping on her left side, sleeping on the side towards the window. She wasn't. She was sleeping on the opposite side. So how did she get from one place to the other? He says when he saw her, she was on the right-hand side. They found her. She's facing the door. Just too many inconsistencies. Well, there's a lot of things, listening to the various testimonies, but I think, like so many of the other people that were there, we wanted to see what Jeffrey McDonald had to say. Now, here's this guy come up. He is not hiding his emotions whatsoever. He's mad, and he's going to let everybody know his body language. There was a couple of times when he was asked questions, I thought he was going to punch James Blackburn. Really, honest to God, I really did think he was going to punch him. He was mad and he wouldn't answer the questions. Now, don't you think if you were asked a question and you could answer it, that you would? But it was like he was asked a question, and what do you think of that, Dr. McDonald? He says, I have nothing to compare it to. Only you. I have nothing to prove it. Only your say-so. That's how he would answer everything. I have only your say-so. He was one angry man on that stand. His body language was unbelievable. It pushed me a little more towards his guilt, but seeing him, I saw how fast he was to anger. And if he was that fast to anger, listen, we've all had kids. As Jim Blackburn said, there's come times when we've raised our hand to spank our kids or slap our kids or knock them on the top of the head, kiddingly like that. But you stop and think before you go too far. He didn't stop and think. He went into some kind of maniacal rage. And why? I don't know. What kind of a psychosis did he have? Esketrol can cause psychosis. Back in the 70s, it was a diet drug, but it was also used for narcolepsy. It was excellent in narcolepsy, people that suffered from that, because you just fall asleep. Well, it would help them to stay awake. But there's so many things that he said. He was taking 3 times a day. He was only taking 1 a day, that he may have taken 1 that night. You don't take Esketrol at night. You take it in the morning, so it helps you all all day, not at night. You're going to go to sleep, hopefully. Yes, I have photos of him.
Where are those?
On my website. He did not like to have pictures taken. Neither did his wife. You know, Pat Mitchell's a very nice person. She's remarried now and has children, but she's a very tall, thin lady. You know, she towered over grade. Well, yeah, and you can think of somebody that when they're in Vietnam, what they must have seen. I know what my husband said he went through when he was in the war. You know, they attacked camps and everything, so it was not only men that were shot, it was women and children as well. I mean, think when he came back. Maybe he just couldn't handle it. But when I heard about those ears on a string, I said, holy mackerlandy. Well, you know, at first he wasn't going to testify until the judge told him he had to testify. And then he said that Helena had confessed to him. What was the purpose of it? My understanding was that he asked her, you know, I need to know, you know, so I can protect you when you're up there testifying. Hey, well, that's why I left the door open, because he normally goes out. That's okay. I'll take care of it. Yeah. He always goes outside. Yeah, you treat me like this and put this hot coat on me, I'll fix you. Yeah, she confessed to everybody. I don't know what the significance was to him any more than it was to anybody else, other than the fact that she's told them I did it. And that yet she told other people I was there, but I wasn't involved in the murder. And I don't really know that she ever testified. I don't remember her ever testifying to the fact that she took part in the murders. It was only that she was there and she held a candle and chanted, "Acid is groovy, kill the pigs." Else to him. Yeah. Her main contention was always, if I get immunity, I will blow this wide open. But she never asked the right people for immunity. Would they have given it to her? I don't know. With her lies and time she'd been in the mental hospital and all the drugs and alcohol and having cirrhosis at a very young age, to have cirrhosis of the liver and be jaundiced and had had a stroke and her parents nursed her back. I mean, can you imagine? That young? It's very hard to fathom. How can I say this? We go to the supermarket. We pick up hairs. We pick up pieces of lint. The neighbor lady gave an affidavit to the effect that she always used Colette's dryer and that she would come in the back door and dry her clothes in the dryer and she would fold them up. There's going to be unsourced hairs in my house. There's going to be unsourced hairs everywhere. I'm going to go to the market. I'm going to bring back something here. For all I know, if somebody went through here and tested for blood, they might find blood, and it wouldn't be mine. But it sure as hell might be some of the workers that built my house. You know what I'm saying? So you can't go by things that are unsourced, because those things can be brought in from the outside. The kids were playing, you know? Maybe they brought them in. So unsourced hairs, I don't know what to say about that other than there's going to be unsourced hairs and fibers in everybody's house. But the fibers and the hairs that were important didn't back up Jeffrey's story. I think that Colette came home. The theory, okay, yeah, why? Why did it have to happen? I want to know what happened to cause him to go into such a maniacal rage. The only thing I can figure out is based on something that Elizabeth, the girl that Colette picked up that night as a writer with her, and they went to the class together, is what she said that was discussed in the classroom about Colette saying that Kimberly would come, or not Kimberly, Kristen would come and get in bed, and that McDonald would want her to get out of bed and leave the baby in bed with him and go and sleep on the couch. And she wanted to tell the child, no, this is Mommy and Daddy's bed, you know, whatever. So the professor agreed with her. And that's the only thing that I can think of outside of the fact that McDonald had told her he was going to Russia with the boxing team, which was not true. There were cracks from the beginning. and they just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. She knows Colette well. Her and Colette used to go in the bathroom and smoke and blow it out of the window because Jeff wouldn't allow them to smoke anyplace else in the house. Oh, Pep is funny. Yeah, no, no. Well, everybody wants to say, well, 2 or 3 prosecuting attorneys got into trouble themselves. I don't see the connection. I see that they got into trouble. In Jim Blackburn's case, it was because he didn't want his clients to know that he didn't win the case. You know, when I researched and questioned him, none of the money that he misappropriated went to him. It all went to his clients who thought they had won their case. When he was caught on it, he admitted it. He stood up like a man and he took his punishment. And he went to prison. And do you know the story about him being in prison? How they let him out ahead of time? You don't know that? They let him out a few weeks before it was time. I got to contend with pants that don't want to stay up. A little person that wants to be, and I don't know why. Now, stay. No, sit down. They let him out. He went home. He called his wife. Okay. He called his wife and thought everything was okay. Then he gets a call. We let you out ahead of time. You can either come back on your own or we'll have to send somebody to pick you up. He told him, I'll be back. And he went back himself, surrendered himself, spent the last week or so, whatever he was in there, and then they let him out and he came home. Now, talk about a humbling situation. He became a waiter at the Oyster Street bar where he used to take his clients and meet other attorneys. He was now waiting on them. So you talk about a humbling experience. Yes, I'm proud to call that man my friend. He paid back all the money and everything, and he's made his way in the community again, and now he gives continual education for lawyers, and he's very good at it. Yeah, so I see what happened. Just because he went awry later on doesn't mean that he was crooked during the McDonald trial. You can't. No, you're on my bad side. Peed on my floor. I can't condemn him. Yes, what he done was wrong. He realized what he had done was wrong, and he paid his debt. I can respect him a hell of a lot more than I can McDonald, who keeps denying. And if he would just show some remorse and say, I'm sorry for what happened, he could get out. They would let him out now. They said he would have to serve 3/4 of his sentence. Well, coming up in 2020. Well, if he does, I don't know what's going to happen in his situation now. I think there'll be another murder. I'm not sure which one, but I think there'll be another murder. And I know you won't put that in, but I wished you would. I mean, just between you and me, the condition of that condo, and trust me, I know what it looks like. He'd get in there with the clean freak that he is. My God, forget it. I've always been drawn. Let me tell you, when I was in high school, to crime stories, there was a group of about 5 or 6 of us, and back then they had the True Detective magazines. I don't know if you remember those. We would save our money and pool our money together to be able to get one of those True Detective magazines, and then we would have to shoot marbles to see who was going to get the magazine first, and then second, and whatever, because we were such crime freaks. I still am to this day. I read true crime. I'm very particular about what I read. The book I read, I want to have pictures so I can see who I'm reading about. I think it's the personalities. We want to know why. Are these people born, or is it inherited? Because the majority, they did a survey one time about serial killers, all have very high IQs. Like Ted Bundy, look at Anne Rule. She works side by side with him, and she never knew what he was. It's just trying to get into the mind of the person that's understand why. But of course, I never do. But some people have such a hatred that hatred will drive them and drive them and drive them. I mean, like a man may hire somebody to kill his wife, then he feels, or vice versa, then he feels or she feels, well, we'll never be safe because there's somebody else that know. So here comes a second murder because then they'll get up enough courage to kill that person and think nobody will ever find out. You know, there's some sick people, some sick minds out there. And a lot of serial killers came from Wisconsin. Madsen, what's his name? Charles Manson, Ed Camper, that guy that ate his victims, Jeffrey Dahmer. Well, hope if he does, I hope that he has an open mind. And I hope he does it with an open mind. I still have to wonder, and I'm yet to figure out, are these people born or is it something that they inherit after they're born? And normally there's telltale signs. Even with McDonald, there were telltale signs, like nobody picked up on it. He knew he lived in a house that was very rigid. His dad was extremely prejudiced. Threw a fit one time at the college, some kind of a luncheon they went to, and they had all black servers. Oh my God, he went into a rage about being served by black people. And then he was very angry because he wanted to be an engineer. He took the test so many times. The last time he missed it by 3 points. And I guess by then he just figured he was never going to make it. He was angry because he was doing work and other people were getting the credit for his draftman. See, he was a draftsman, but he wanted to become the engineer. He was a very strong, stern man, and he is. I don't know. He had no respect for women at all. As far as he was concerned, women were second-class citizens. And I don't think that Dorothy's life was easy with him, but he died at a very young age. I think he was 49 or 50 when he died of pulmonary fibrosis. Do I think he portrayed him?
That's it.
I don't think he did anything that any other journalist would not do or have not done. Really. I don't know this for a fact, but McDonald took a chance himself by making those tapes. If he'd have got caught, he would have been put in the hole, which he was thrown in the hole several times. And one time he was knifed in prison. I think Joe was at a point he needed to get as much as he could get, be it right or wrong. That's not for me to say, because I believe all journalists do that. The movie, when I saw it, it had been aired. I mean, previews had been aired, and I remember I went out to dinner. My mother-in-law, my husband was out of town, and his mother said, "Would you like to go out to dinner?" I said, "If it's an early dinner, because there's a movie I'm watching." And poor soul said, "Well, I want to go about 7:30, 8 o'clock." I said, "Ma, I don't think you can eat that fast. We better make it a little earlier." Yeah, and I taped it, and I still have the tape that I took. I have all the pictures, at the screening of the movie. I have one of the programs with all the signatures on it and everything. I can't begin to tell you how many times I've watched it. If a lot of times, because I have a TV on my desk in there, if I'm in there and I'm working on his case, I will pop that in and watch it while I'm working. And I have read Fatal Vision. I cannot tell you how many times I've read that book. And every time I read it, I come away with something new. And you wouldn't think after this many years that I would, or else I've forgotten. Oh, yes, yes. But both sides made mistakes. The government side was just a little stronger than the defense. And what's this? Bernie Siegel cooked his own goose. We exchanged some emails. Yes. Yep. I sent Bernie Siegel an email, and he was teaching at the Golden Gate University in San Francisco, I think, at that time. My phone number. Sent me an email back, and we discussed the case. I asked him, I said, "How could you be so confident and be so good at the Article 32? I said, "You dropped the ball." And he said, "Yeah, it didn't go the way, that he thought it was going to go." He was still of the opinion, though, that the government didn't produce all of the exculpatory evidence. But always his main contention was they weren't allowed to test the material. But John Thornton, was one of their he was a doctor, and he said that they wouldn't let him examine the evidence. That's not true. They let him into the jail cell where all this evidence was being held. They said he had access to any evidence that he wanted to test, but he had to do his testing at the FBI lab. He didn't want to do that. He wanted the evidence sent to California. The prosecution would be crazy to let that evidence out of their hands or their jurisdiction, and let it go all the way to California. No, I agree. I think that they were right. The fact that they offered them the lab free of charge, that they could test whatever they wanted to test out of that jail cell with somebody from the government there, to witness what they were doing, like it should have been if the government was testing something that they had. But that wasn't good enough. They wanted to take it to California. Yeah, he did. He told me that. He says, I underestimated. Now, you have to take into consideration what he meant by that. Bernie told me that one of the problems was he felt that he had underestimated the government's attorneys. Now, the reason that he underestimated was Jim Blackburn had never tried a murder case. Brian Murtaugh had never tried a case, period. So they were both neophytes when it came, to trying this case. And damn, they did a good job. I remember when Brian Murtaugh got up and he said, I'm going to give the jurors a trip through the slaughterhouse. He went by it piece by piece by piece, and it really was a slaughterhouse. When I got to go into that house the first time with pieces of the floor cut out, pieces of the wall cut out, furniture still there, other things still there, it was all that was left of what was supposed to be a loving family. It was very eerie. It was awful. They were getting ready to redo it. Yeah. No, they didn't tear it down. They remodeled it, and they turned McDonald's 3-bedroom apartment into a 2-bedroom apartment, and then built another 2-bedroom apartment where the bedrooms of McDonald's apartment was. They made McDonald's apartment upstairs, like the Kalin's apartment was. I went back in it. I went there and knocked on the door when he was a captain, I can't even remember his name, and his wife lived there. They let me in, and I saw how the apartment had been. It was like cut off where the living room, where those 2 steps were, that part of the hallway and the bedrooms now belonged to another apartment. And when you came in the front door, you went directly up the steps. And then there was a living room, much like it was before, dining room, and then there was a pass-through. There wasn't a pass-through to the kitchen before, but there was a pass-through there then. And it was very nice, very nice. Yes, they tore it down. I was there when they tore it down. Well, it was rumor. You get to know people in the Army. You're got to have your sources out there. I say, when is this going to happen? And they told me. So I hopped a plane, and I got there the day before, and then the morning it was going to be torn down. I positioned myself in the group of spectators that were there, and that was a very strange feeling, let me tell you. I thought, because they had cranes, that was dropping big balls down on top of the roof, and everything. That's what they should have done in the beginning instead of remodeling it. But they didn't, and that's okay. They turned it into some kind of a office hall type place now. But I thought that the dust from that building going down was never going to go away. And over in one corner of the sky, you could see this big thing going up, and it had just one like little twig that was hanging off from it, and it was just going. I told myself that must be Colette and Kimberly and Kristen. Finally they're getting to leave this place. It's very eerie. I'll never forget that. There was quite a few people out there. There were people from government, and then, of course, all the workers that were going to operate that heavy crane, knocking things off and dropping things down. But they've made it into a recreational type facility there now, and that's good. But I haven't been that way in a long time. The last time I was by after they tore it down was once I went back past there. This was after Peter had passed away, and I saw the new building, and I thought, that's nice. Maybe Colette and the kids are finally at peace now. Mm-hmm. How big was it? Well, it was a 2-night thing, and I just couldn't wait till the next night. You got to understand that this happened back in the 1970s. Right before that had been the Tate murders, which incidentally, I lived down here, and if you walked up the back of my hill, you would go into their fence that went into their backyard and whatever. And those people, and then the guy that had the visitor that lived out in the caretaker's shed and everything, that was almost unheard of, back then. Everybody was scared to death. I mean, even the cover of Esquire magazine said Lee Marvin afraid. Everybody was buying guns. And then the fact that, what was it, 2 days later, the Lee Bianchi happened, and Charlie Manson saying, well, I looked in several houses, but every house I looked in, they had children, and I didn't want to kill children. I don't know. Charlie Manson could have made something out of himself. He was in with the Beach Boys. They actually recorded one of his songs that he had written. If he could have gotten himself straight, Terry Melner, Doris Day's son, lived in the house that Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski was renting. And he had been to that house. And Terry had even told him, I will help you get record contract, because he didn't have a bad voice, you know? And then all of a sudden they found out what a psycho he was, and the Beach Boys wouldn't let him back near their houses, and Terry didn't want to have anything to do with him. So, I mean, he could have had so much, but he settled for so little. Yeah. It was. There wasn't 24-hour-a-day TV then, and, everybody was afraid. And we all associated that kind of murder with people that were more famous, movie stars, because so many movie stars had been attacked and whatever. We didn't think that it would happen to ordinary people, but Colette was an ordinary person, just like my daughter, who later got almost beat to death. And she was an innocent person, just got attacked by two druggies, and just unbelievable. Colette, she wasn't glamorous. She wasn't rich. She wasn't famous. She was an ordinary woman, just like me, just like anybody else. And it happened to her. So if it could happen to her and her children, it could have been me. That was what my thinking was, at that time. And I think Colette and those children, they don't have a voice anymore. And I think part of the reason I'm constantly going, and I'm still uncovering things, still. I'm looking anytime somebody tells me they have something, if I can afford it, I'm on a plane and I'm gone. Somebody has to speak for them. And all these years, Brian Murtaugh, all these judges, all the CID, they have been speaking for her all these years. Her husband certainly doesn't speak for her. And that's sad. All he says is, I will not be sorry for something I didn't do. Well, who's going to know that a child sleeps with a security blanket and tuck it in? Who's going to know those kind of things? A stranger's not. Who's going to pick up people and put them back in their beds? Most people, when they go in and they're in some kind of a maniacal rage like that, where they fall, that's where they stay. Yes, I pick up on something. Now, whether it's things I have forgotten, but I'll come away with something else and I'll say, how did I miss that? Or have I forgotten that? Yeah, it's very well documented. And as compared to fatal justice or final justice, yeah. There were so many mistakes in that book I could not believe. In Joe McGinnis's book, no, yeah, I'm final justice. Fatal justice, what I said. Yeah. Lord, now I lost my trend. Yeah, that's what I said to begin with. There's a lot of mistakes in that book. Now, in Earl Morris's, there's a lot of mistakes, and I have them itemized, even the page numbers, and that was only one going through. I'm sure I could find a lot more. But in Joe McGinnis's book, I found one small mistake, and that's all I found. And trust me, I read that book, and I compared it to the records, and I'd read that book, and I'd compare it some more. That's the only mistake that I ever found. It was when Peter Kearns and Fred and Mildred went to talk to Judge about putting in a citizen's arrest for McDonald. Eljanon Butler. Yes, he named the wrong town, and that's the only mistake that was in it. And I call that minor. Yeah, he said the photographer, there was actually 3. He called Bobby her younger brother. I have them listed on my website. I listed them with page numbers. But Earl Morris is a very talented man. That Fine Blue Line was, yeah, that he did, and then the guy that he got out of prison, that was such a wonderful thing, that he was able to get somebody out that was truly innocent. But my God, what happened then? Do you know what happened after that? The guy had to sue him because he wouldn't leave him alone. He says he got me out, but that doesn't mean he owns me for the rest of my life. It's a strange situation. Well, I knew escatrol because I was studying to be a nurse back then, and it was a diet pill, and it was a widely spread used diet pill. But it didn't take them too long to get that stuff off of the market because they found out too many people were getting bad effects from it, getting into psychosis, thinking they could fly. And it was like being on LSD, sort of. It really sped you up. It got associated with the McDonald's. When I was reading Fatal Vision for the first time, one of the main things that popped out at me was escatrol, because that was the first time that escatrol had been associated with Jeffrey McDonald. I later read his notes that he did for his attorney, which I have a copy of, and it told where he had been taking escatrol and he was on a weight watching program with some of the other soldiers, and that he had lost 12 to 15 pounds within 3 weeks' time. So you don't lose 12 to 15 pounds in 2 to 3 weeks' time taking one escatrol a day. Yep. I would say to a degree. I think the media certainly has, because one of his comments, Jeffrey McDonald's comments, was the anniversary of their death is coming up. So that means somebody's going to be here to interview me again. Well, of course, nobody's interviewing him anymore, on the anniversary of their deaths. But yes, I think the media, television to a certain degree, yes, I do. Litigated. Yeah. It's the longest history in history and it's still being litigated. And do you know the latest? No. What's going on? Okay, the Fourth Circuit Court denied them, and they tried to get, I forget what it's called, but instead of 3 judges hearing like they normally do, yeah, they wanted to have the whole 9 yards of all the judges to hear it. They got denied. Okay, I went to the courthouse when I was in Fayetteville because there was a lot, or not Fayetteville, Raleigh, because there was a lot of people that I needed to see. The courthouse was one of them. I went, I found out that his wife has filed in Supreme Court for him. She filed the papers that he's going to be his own pro se. And she filed the papers on the 23rd of April. They sent it back to her, giving her 60 days to correct all the mistakes. And it doesn't have a number yet. So we have to wait to see once she gets it and if she refiles it, to see if he can get into the Supreme Court. And then, of course, next year is for the parole. And of course, you can bet I'll be there if I'm still alive. Yeah, for the parole hearing. And I'm sure Bob will be there. But just in case something happens to Bob, we have the power of attorney. It's all documented, signed, sealed, and everything. So I will represent the family, which I hope Bob is still there. I'm not sure. It was like some kids playing, taking something, because I talked to a person about this hypnosis tape that was there during the time. Now, the person that did this was a good hypnosis. Evidently, he has a good background and good history of doing this. But they said, oh, he was under hypnosis. They said he had to lay there with one hand up the whole time that he was under hypnosis, and he perspired so much that he had to change shirts all the time. Well, lo and behold, when I got to see the video of it, I didn't see no hand up, and during the whole thing, he had the same shirt on. So I'm not sure what they saw, because it wasn't what I saw. I saw him laying on a table, ranting and raving with his head rolling back and forth. No, don't. I'll help you, Kimberly. I'll help you. Daddy'll help you. I mean, just crazy. What are you people doing here? I mean, just not what I had imagined somebody under hypnosis would do. Not that I'm not sure he could be hypnotized. I don't think you can be hypnotized if you're not willing to. But there again, that's just my own opinion. I have no idea. Maybe they wanted to know what they... Yeah, but it wasn't. Of course, they went and it wasn't allowed into the court, and Judge Dupree wouldn't allow any psychiatric, unless the defense got to examine him, or not the defense, the prosecution got to examine him, which those two doctors did. Yeah, but that was off, and that was in 1979. Yes, at the trial in 1979, right before the ending of the trial, Sadoff, and because it was done in what's his name, Smith, Attorney Smith's office, and he it went on, and he claims he wrote that, and I'm trying to think of his name now. See, I need my cheat notes, huh? No, 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 no. This was the two that the prosecution wanted to check him. He's dead now. I have to, yeah. And they checked him, and McDonald wrote and said how confused that one of the psychiatrists was, and that he asked him, did he ever have sex with animals? Did he do all this kind of crazy things? And that he didn't know what he was doing. Why can't I think of those names? One was a psychologist, and the other one was a psychiatrist. Yes. To me, that the psychiatrist that Bernie Siegel hired to examine him back during the Article 32 hearing, and later examined him at a later time, Sadoff did, said that he was striving to always be perfect. He wanted to be a Superman, for instance. But I think McDonald had a problem with his sexual identity. He was questioning his manhood, how many women he could bed. And I mean, when McDonald talked about him, like one of the questions he was asked if he remembered at the grand jury, if he remembered so-and-so. His reply was, and with no finesse at all, said, I balled her, so what? How do you say this in the grand jury? But that's exactly what he said. I balled her, so what? Is that a new word for having sex with her? What the hell is ball?
A lot of affairs.
Yes, he had a lot of affairs, and there was rumors that he was gay too. Yeah, from Ron Harrison, but he threw Ron Harrison under the bus. You don't know that story? After the accident, after they were murdered, and Ron Harrison was there wanting to do everything for him. He was in the hospital, and Ron Harrison asked him, is there anything I can do for you? He says, yes, I'd like a taste of cold duck. So he went out, and Mildred and Freddie, and also asked him if when he went to get the cold duck, if he could pick up some liquor for them, and they would reimburse. So he did. He came back and dropped off the cold duck. Well, lo and behold, they must have had the cold duck, because one of the medical staff found it in the trash can and wanted to know, are you drinking it because medication, that you're on, and whatever. And he says, Ron brought it. He didn't say I asked him to bring it. He says he brought it to me. He thought it would make me feel better, but it didn't. And that was the end of that friendship. Outside of the fact of him saying, I'm sure you've heard the rumors about Ron Harrison and I. I did find him.
He's Oregon.
Oregon. But he wants nothing to do with the McDonald case whatsoever. Well, I'm sure, he was there the night before and had Jell-O and was reading the magazine. Oh, yes. Got him on the phone. These people all have different lives now, and a lot of them don't want to remember what they went through. It's not only destroyed the Kassab family, it destroyed the Stevensons, it destroyed McDonald's family. I've thought to myself many times, I wonder what his poor mother must have thought. She must have thought, what did I do wrong? I have 3 children. One's a drug addict, got mixed up with the mob. The other one is an alcoholic. And my favorite, which was her favorite, was Jeffrey murdered his family. And I think she came to terms with that, because I do know in her final years that she spent a lot of her time, she was on oxygen, and she used to go see him all the time. But the little tanks of oxygen only would hold for so many hours, and you'd have to take so many empties. It wasn't feasible anymore. So she would spend her time in bed watching Midnight Caller. Do you remember that series? Midnight Caller was with Gary Cole, the guy that played Jeffrey in Fatal Vision. And she said he looked so much like McDonald, looked so much like her son. Who, Dorothy? Yeah. So, yeah. So you know what I'm telling you is the truth. I don't know what it was. I can't help but wonder if when Colette came home, maybe they got into an argument. Could it have been Colette expressing her concern over being left alone to give birth after she had two very difficult deliveries, and the doctor telling her not to get pregnant again? It was dangerous, for her to get pregnant again. And the fact that she may have come home and told him, I brought up about me having to go and sleep on the sofa, and the professor of the class and the fellow students all agreed that my way was the best way. See, that would be something that would be very hard for him to accept, that she was going to take somebody else's word or somebody else's opinion. I don't know what happened, but something had to happen, and I don't believe that he went in and found his side of the bed wet, and that's why he ended up on the couch. I don't believe that that is the true cause. His side of the bed was probably wet, but it wasn't Kristen that wet that bed. It was Kimberly. And they proved that with the urine. That means that Kimberly was in bed with Colette and not Kristen, like he said. Remember, he said, I got up to... Oh, yeah, she still occasionally. Yeah. She had enuresis, and that was one of the thoughts that crossed Freddie's mind, was he possibly molesting one of the children. But when they tested that urine spot that was on the bed, it came back that it came from either Colette's blood type or Kimberly's blood type, certainly not Kristen. That was ruled out. About what? Burying my doubts. I'm not sure they'll ever be buried 100. I think I'll always have questions. I want to know why. I know that I'm never going to know the why. I don't think that Jeffrey McDonald is ever going to tell us the why. The victims can't tell us why. So I just kind of have to remove that question mark from the why and put a period there, because there is no answer. But that will always haunt me. I want to know why. What caused you to go into such a maniacal rage? And that's what it was. It had to be some kind of a maniacal rage. But I don't understand why they didn't get him on first-degree murder as opposed to second-degree, because you hit the first blow, but once you hit the second blow, then that becomes the intent to kill. Yeah. I don't have doubts that he's guilty. I buried those. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, I buried those a long time ago. There is no way he's guilty. When you take a piece of paper and you line up that he's not guilty, yeah, you take a piece of paper and you put things for him here and things for the government over here that has been proven, not just questioned, but have been proven beyond a fact. No, there is no doubt in my mind. The right person is in jail. And I do that a lot. When I have things I want to get rid of, my anger or whatever, I do bury them. And I bury them in the ground in little boxes. Yeah, I just stripped everything from myself and put it in the box and say, I'm done with you now. I have no doubts in my mind. I don't remember what day it was. I lived in California at the time that I came, reading, studying. I don't know where I had been, but I'd come home and I had come across a lot of stuff. The girl that he had the sexual encounter when he was in his BOQ, that would come every day and bring him lunch, and the damn guards would let her in. This is another thing I don't understand. Why did the guards let her in? They were supposed to be, guarding him. And I said, well, there's no set way to grieve. Everybody has to grieve in their own fashion. I've seen people get married within 6 months of losing their spouse. And then I started talking to myself and I started saying, do I have doubts as to his guilt anymore? Or do I think there's still a chance that he might be innocent? Finally, I said, God damn it, he's innocent. That's it. I got me a little box. Yes, there's no way that he's guilty. Not guilty. There's no way he's not guilty, and I have no more reason to question that. So I got me a little box, and I got my little shovel, and I went into my flower bed, and I buried it. Is that the story you're talking about, or are you talking about something else? Because you said something about a grill. I buried things in different places. Well, but this family has had no peace. They can't move on with their lives because every time they want to move on, they can't. You're faced with another court hearing, or something else is trying to get into court again. Well, I'll excuse you. You're trying to make a buck, and that's okay. I'll tell you something later. I won't tell you now. Why? I don't want to. Well, what the hell? I hear that people are actually paying Catherine McDonald for interviews now. And I said, what in the hell could that woman possibly have to say that people would pay to hear when she won't even open up her garage door and let anybody see all that quote unquote material that belongs to her husband? Earl Morris told me he gave her money. He told me he gave her money. What's his name? Smith, the attorney. She went crying to him and he gave her $3,000. And he's another one. He took the affidavit from, Jimmy Britt, and he didn't notice that what Britt said didn't match up with the one that he said before, and he didn't caught it, and he got called on that in court on the 12th. In 2012, he got called on that. And the man got off of the stand and went and shook hands with Jeffrey McDonald. Whatever. He did the very best he could. No. Smith. Earl didn't testify. He was in the audience with, I think when I let him have it, he was with Ann Lander's daughter. Can't remember what her name was. Great big heavy set. Nothing like her mother whatsoever. I did. I wanted to talk to him about the case, and he didn't want to talk to me. He did not want to talk to me at all. He wrote back and said, I know my handwriting is hard for you to read. If I only had a typewriter or something that he could write on. I called him at his website and said, if he's in need of a typewriter, I will pass it on to him, which didn't sit good whatsoever. But yeah, I wrote. And Catherine had a letter up there that she said I wrote for the longest time. Now, she doesn't have that website up there anymore. I don't know what happened to it. Maybe she couldn't afford to pay for it anymore. And she had that up there, but only bits and pieces of the letter that I wrote. Word was getting around, and in things that were being filed in the court that she was still confessing, and then a lot of documents that I got of continual investigation. Joe used to teach at a university, and I sent him an email there, and we just started communicating, you know. He was an easy person to talk to. And then I finally got to meet him in person in 2012 and got to meet Nancy at that time. She's a wonderful lady. She was Joe's right hand in everything that he did. And her life hasn't been easy because of this McDonald case, you know, and when they had to go to court and they had to haul their 2 little boys that they had. Yes. Yeah, that's what I mean. Everybody that had been involved in this case ended up changing spouses. And Jay told me the time that when Jeffrey McDonald announced his engagement to Randy, that he sent the limousine to pick up Jay and his mother. And here was Jeffrey dressed up in this white suit, you know, and he had Randy there. And Jay said it was the strangest sight I had ever seen in my life. He said, here are all these people that I had known that had been married to each other, like Jerry Hughes and his wife, and all these people. Now they were divorced from each other and married to other people, but still there with their now spouses instead of their ex-spouses. He said it was like walking into some kind of a movie. He said you just wouldn't believe it. And here they were all there. And I don't know how much you talked to Jay, because he would probably tell you the same thing he told me, that at that dinner, once McDonald announced his engagement, his mother never touched her food. She just sat there, and she just could not believe it. And he said she was silent all the way home. I'm thinking maybe she was thinking, I don't want a repeat of what happened before. Yeah. It could be eschatrol could cause a psychosis, but he would have to be taking more than one a day, you know, to get into that psychosis. And if he said, like what he said in his notes, I may have taken one after dinner or before he ate dinner that night so that he could stay awake. He was known for being a night owl, you know, so he wouldn't need it for that reason. But he also said that snacking, he liked to snack at bedtime after supper. So, but still, I wouldn't think that you would take it would keep you awake all night. He's a doctor. He's got to be up early the next day. There is something else I would like to tell you. I don't know where you would fit it in. McDonald talks in past tense. When he was, one of the things when I was listening to the tape the first time, I like to hear the tone of the voice. And it's too bad back then that they didn't have a video where you could see his body language, because that tells you even more. He's talking, and Grebner, Shaw, and Ivory were the three that were interviewing him. And he says, "You're sitting here telling me I killed my wife and kids." And Grebner said something to the effect, "I believe so." And he says, "But why?" And Grebner says, "Well, I can think of a number of reasons. I've been happily married for over 20 years, but sometimes I get mad at my wife." Anyway, the long and the short of the story is MacDonald says to him, "Why would I destroy it? I had a beautiful wife that loved me and kids. I was a doctor, not I am a doctor." That told me a lot. You're speaking in past terms. I was a doctor. You're still a doctor. Yeah. You see how I would go towards that? And another thing, McDonald is a very cunting, and anytime anybody said anything that he didn't agree with, he was going to speak up and bring it to light. Another thing happened in the Article 32. Shaw purposely missed Kimberly instead of Kristen about a hair found under the toenail or the fingernail. MacDonald recognized that because he started to laugh and he started to say something and he caught himself and he just let it go. He didn't say a word. And that's not MacDonald. Anytime somebody got something that wasn't right, he was going to correct them. Why didn't he correct Shaw when he said it was Kimberly as opposed to Kristen? I don't know why he didn't. I'm asking you why. He didn't want to churn up a worm. Yeah, a hornet's nest or whatever you want to call it. But I found that very telling too.
Yeah.
There were many things in there. But that one about I was a doctor as opposed to saying am a doctor. No. I saw him at the 1979 trial. I was with him in the elevator with Peter Kearns, his wife, the black lady, beautiful black girl that got in. And he referred to as brown sugar. And then when we got off of the elevator going into the courtroom and he started ogling Peter Kearns' daughter, and I mean ogling, I looked at him and the first thing that came to mind was his appearance. He doesn't look like a murderer. And then I said to myself, what does a murderer supposed to look like? So I squashed that right away. But I said to myself, he looks like an attorney. Here he is, dressed to perfection, California tan, styled hairdo. You could see his fingernails had clear polish on, which is nothing wrong. A lot of men have manicures and pedicures. But once he sat down and you realized, hey, he's the accused, then you question yourself. He doesn't look like a murderer. But there again, what is a murderer supposed to look like? Can be your next door neighbor. And you would never know it, just like psychopaths. God, I said, I don't want to have to deal with another Morris because he was not very pleasant to deal with. He was just very set back then in his belief that I'm not going to say that he thought McDonald was 100% not guilty. I'm going to say that he had issues about coming to terms that he was 100%. Yes, guilty. Yeah. But when somebody tells me I haven't made up my mind, and then he puts me down in the list of characters, I couldn't have written this book without the help, and he lists me, and then over here on another page, he's telling me I have a shrine to the victims. You son of a bitch. Pardon me. Oh, I was so mad. The mistakes, it was like he did no research. Or I don't want to say he did no research. He did damn little research. He didn't go out there and talk to people. He didn't find them. If you go in his book and look at the amount of people that he talked to, the majority of them were from the defense's side. Freddie is writing about Jeff, and he's saying that Jeff said that while he lied, he did tell some truth that he said that they said there were 3 intruders or 4 intruders. And he said, figuratively speaking, he could name 3 of those intruders. And one was Colette, one was Kimberly, one was Kristen. And the 4th one yet unseen was the unborn child. That's a very heartwarming thing that he wrote. If you use nothing else, you should get that. Well, it's heartwarming to me. Profound. It's a very profound statement. And he says, here I am being flown out 3,000 miles to be asked if Joe McGinnis's book, Fatal Vision, was the truth and whatnot. And yeah, I have that written in his own handwriting.